My name is Claire. I'm 32 years old. After dating my boyfriend Steve for 6 years, I proposed to him not once, but 5 times, and he finally said yes. Then, I was caught up in the chaos of wedding planning, but I was so happy that I couldn't help humming all the time.
Wow, I'm really getting married.
One day, while I looked at our prenuptial agreement, I was filled with happiness.
Wait, Steve. This doesn't seem like such an important term.
As I signed the agreement, I tilted my head in confusion. In fact, agreeing to the prenup was one of the things Steve requested before accepting my proposal.
Each of us keeps the assets we had before marriage. The same goes for anything we might inherit in the future. If we ever need to revise it, like if we have kids, we'll come back and make changes together. It's certainly important, but did it really need to be written down like this?
I asked. Steve just shrugged and said,
Well, consider it just to be on the safe side, like having insurance or something.
He had been insisting it was absolutely non-negotiable, but he only gave me a vague response, which I found weird. Anyway, it didn't seem like a big deal to me, so I decided not to overthink it. A while later, something happened that revealed to me why he was so insistent. Steve has 2 older brothers. I met them briefly at his parents' house before the wedding.
We get along okay, but both of them are a little off, if I'm being honest. Don't take anything they say too seriously, or you'll get dragged into their nonsense.
Steve warned me. I didn't know how to react to such a blunt introduction and just gave an awkward smile. To my surprise, his parents nodded in agreement with strained expressions. Even so, the next time I saw them was at the wedding, and I didn't get much chance to talk to them, so I completely forgot about Steve's warning. Then one day, the call came out of the blue just before noon when Steve was away for work on his day off.
Hey, Cease, you like fish?
The caller just asked so without any introduction, and I was startled.
Excuse me?
I tried to think of anyone who'd call me Cease like that, but I came up blank. He knew my home phone number, so it couldn't be a stranger. While I puzzled over it, the caller burst into loud laughter.
It's me, Steve's brother, Ta-da, Cease's big bro.
Huh? Oh, you're my brother-in-law?
I wondered to myself which one he was, the oldest or the middle one. By the way, did he even say he was Cease's big bro? I swallowed my irritation. When I asked,
What's going on?
He said,
I just got back from a fishing trip. I caught a ton of mackerel, way too much to eat, so I thought I'd bring some over. Steve loves pickled fish with onions, doesn't he?
After hearing that, I was relieved and felt a rush of happiness.
Thank you so much. He's working today, but I know he'll be so happy to come home to find that.
After hanging up, I ran to the fridge.
Good thing I've got onions, green peppers, and carrots on hand.
Humming to myself, I finished slicing up all the veggies just as my brother-in-law arrived. Finally, I knew it was the middle brother, George. Seeing his face through the peephole of the door, I opened the door with a smile. But then, as soon as the door opened, George said,
Hey, gotta go bathroom? Can you pay the cab fare for me?
What? Sure.
As he rushed inside, I hurried outside to pay the waiting cab.
Phew.
George smiled, emerging from the bathroom with a big grin as I returned.
Thanks for the cab fare. Oh, and since you've got your wallet out, I'm ready to get it now.
He said so and held out his hand expectantly.
Excuse me?
I mean for the fish. Let's call it $50.
He said to me. I was clearly puzzled.
What did you say?
I nearly dropped my wallet in shock. I admit I didn't confirm, but I thought the fish was just a kind offer. I even prepared a bottle of wine as a return gift. I had never expected to be charged as much as $50. However, He was standing there as if it was the most normal thing in the world. He had come all this way, and he did say it was a lot of fish. Besides, I didn't want to make him feel unpleasant. I calmed myself down, took $50 out of my wallet, and handed it to him.
Thanks a lot. The fish are in the cooler. I'm leaving the fishing gear here too, so tell Steve to drop it off at our parents' house next time. All right, see ya.
Wait. Hey, hold on a second.
I stared at the cooler and fishing gear left in the entryway. I was completely bewildered. Before I could say another word, he waved the $50 bill in the air and quickly left.
Hey. Please wait.
By the time I managed to get past the pile of stuff he left blocking the door, he was already gone.
Seriously? Why did he leave all this here? We don't even have the space for it. Oh no, what about the cab fare?
I suddenly remembered he hadn't paid me back for the cab fare I covered. I bit my lip in frustration.
Now I have to ask Steve not only to take this gear to his parents, but also to get back the cab fare. I really don't want to do that.
Anyway, I opened the large cooler George had left behind.
No way.
I couldn't believe my eyes. On a bed of exaggeratedly arranged ice lay exactly 3 tiny mackerel, no more than 2 inches each.
You've got to be kidding me.
I slumped down right there in the entryway.
What am I supposed to do with all the veggies I have shredded now?
That wasn't really the problem, but I couldn't think of anything else to say. A few months later, I was heading to a coffee shop. That was because I got a call from Steve's oldest brother, Fred. He said,
"I need to talk to you about something important, but don't tell Steve."
His voice sounded like he wanted to talk about something urgent. He insisted it was about Steve's future and made me promise not to mention it to Steve or their parents. It all felt suspicious, but the coffee shop he chose didn't seem sketchy, and it was broad daylight. Since I figured hearing him out wouldn't hurt, I decided to go.
"Claire, over here."
Fred called out to me loudly as soon as I walked in. His loud voice echoed through the shop, and the other customers turned to see what was happening. I was embarrassed, so I hurried to his table.
"Wow, look at you blushing. So cute, Claire."
His booming voice only drew more attention and made me even more uncomfortable.
Hey, could you lower your voice a bit?
I tried to ask him to tone it down, but he cut me off and suddenly gestured to someone sitting just out of my view.
"Let me introduce her. This is my new girlfriend."
Fred said to a tall and stunning woman, who stood up gracefully next to him.
Oh, nice to meet you.
I greeted her awkwardly. Before I could say anything else, she snarled.
You've got to be kidding me.
The next thing I knew, a sharp slap landed on my cheek. My vision blurred for a moment.
Excuse me?
I touched my stinging cheek as I was completely stunned. Why did I get slapped by the woman I had just met? Before I could process what was happening, she glared at me and shouted,
This little nobody is your new girlfriend? Stop kidding me. I'm done with you. Just so you know, I'm the one dumping you.
She said so, her eyes blazing with anger. She stormed out, her heels clicking angrily on the floor.
What just happened? Would you care to explain?
I asked Fred as I was holding my still burning cheek.
Why am I suddenly going through this?
For a moment, I was stunned, but as I thought it through, a surge of anger overwhelmed me.
You said this was an important matter concerning Steve's future. This is outrageous.
I protested. My voice was trembling with fury, but he laughed casually.
"Oh, I'm sorry. I just had a little spat with that woman about breaking up. Thanks to you, it's all cleared up now. Thank you for playing the girlfriend role. I really appreciate it. Come on, don't be so mad. Let's calm down and talk, okay, Claire?"
Don't you dare address me so casually.
His carefree attitude only made me more irritated, but he said, showing no sign of remorse.
Oh, come on, Claire. Stuff like this happens all the time. It's no big deal.
Are you serious? This has never happened to me before, and it is a big deal to me. I can't just stay calm about this. Stop messing with me.
I shouted before I could stop myself.
Wow, you're scarier than I thought, Claire. That's surprising. Hey, look around. Other customers are staring at us.
He said so as he shrugged, and I was taken aback. Coming back to my senses, I glanced around and realized that countless faces were turned toward us. Their expressions showed confusion, annoyance, and curiosity.
Oh my.
I murmured. Unable to handle the stares, I crouched down in embarrassment. Ignoring me entirely, Fred strolled past with long strides.
Well, see ya. Tell Steve I said hi.
Wait, hold on.
I scrambled to stand up to chase after him. Then, an apologetic server approached and held something out to me.
Excuse me, could you please settle the bill?
He asked.
Seriously?
How on earth could this be possible? If there hadn't been so many people around, I might have screamed those words out loud. After back-to-back awful experiences with Steve's brothers, I was absolutely done with them. I told Steve everything and decided not to respond to any more calls or messages from them. If they needed something, they'd have to go through Steve. However, I would always welcome Steve's parents. They were totally different from his brothers. Steve's parents were always so kind to me, and more than anything, they're the parents of my beloved husband. Therefore, when I heard they were planning a party to celebrate their milestone birthdays, there was no way I could skip those occasions.
Wow. This house is even bigger than I imagined. I'm in awe. And the garden is gorgeous. Is that the guest house over there?
Yes. The main house is relatively new, but the guest house is a relocated historic building, about 230 years old.
You've even got a thatched roof and a porch. Besides, does the well still work? Can I take some pictures later?
My mother-in-law loves historic homes, so she was practically glowing with excitement. I couldn't help but smile and replied.
Of course.
Her cheeks were flushed with delight while my father-in-law stood nearby, running his hand along a massive wooden beam with a contented smile on his face. They both looked so happy. In fact, it was this historic home, which I had inherited from my grandparents, that they wanted to use as their party venue. Once my father-in-law said to me,
Turns out, our first date was at a historic building tour. We bonded over coffee on a porch and realized we were the same age.
He looked a little embarrassed while he was telling me the story of how he met my mother-in-law.
If you're this thrilled, I should have invited you to see it before the furniture was moved out.
I said so, feeling a twinge of regret. The house was rented out when my grandparents moved into an assisted living facility, and it had been used as a fine restaurant until the previous week. I agreed to let my in-laws have a private day there after the restaurant closed, but I wished they could have seen it fully furnished.
Though this is perfect. Besides, it's only because there aren't customers around that we can truly enjoy this peaceful atmosphere.
My mother-in-law said so and reassured me that they were enjoying it so much. They arrived 2 hours before the scheduled party to explore every corner of the house and savor coffee on the porch. However, the calm was suddenly interrupted by loud, heavy footsteps.
Seriously, only Steve came to greet us. The place is empty, and even the food's catered. I can't believe it.
Fred complained. He burst in, muttering his disbelief, and Steve stepped in to gently reason with him.
Come on, that's what Mom and Dad wanted. Stop complaining. Besides, This isn't just any catering, but it's premium course lunch from a popular fine restaurant.
Steve said so with the same smile I love as always.
Still, it's nothing more than catering, right? If you were going to have this party, you should have reserved this whole restaurant when it was still running. You're so cheap, Steve.
George chimed in. Both his brothers complained, but how much did they think renting out a top-tier restaurant would cost?
They had the nerve to complain about today's event fee being too high, but who's the real cheapskate here? Not to mention the cab fare I covered for those ridiculously tiny 3 mackerel, or the bill from that breakup drama at the cafe. I haven't been paid back for any of it. I can't just let them get away with all this.
I muttered under my breath. Despite all that, laughter filled the air during my in-laws' milestone celebration. When my in-laws were off exploring the guest house, Fred suddenly blurted out.
Hey, I've got a great idea.
Something told me his great idea wouldn't be great for me in most cases. Steve was sitting beside me and met my gaze with a worried expression as if he had read my thoughts. And sure enough, after Fred whispered something to George, the two of them started grinning mischievously.
We're family, right?
Steve was confused and tilted his head. Fred seemed impatient and got straight to the point.
So, this place is closed down now, hasn't it?
Huh? Yes, it has.
Steve answered. Then both brothers leaned forward in unison.
You really scored big, huh? This is what they call marrying up.
Totally. You've got a huge property and a mansion all in one. You hit the jackpot.
The brothers' voice sounded like a duet of sickly sweet voices.
No way. You've got it all wrong,
Steve said. However, his words went in one ear and out the other for them.
Keeping it all for yourself isn't fair, is it?
Come on, sharing a little wouldn't hurt anyone.
They chimed in, practically licking their lips. I felt nauseous at their audacity, but quickly thought of a plan.
What exactly are you hoping for?
I asked so with a forced sweet smile, and their eyes lit up. It was painfully obvious. They assumed the property I inherited was also Steve's and wanted a piece of the pie. What a ridiculous notion they had. When I first inherited the house, Steve had asked me.
You still have the prenuptial agreement, right?
He reminded me he'd never interfere with what was mine, but offered to help if I ever needed advice. True to his word, he never asked for a single penny. His integrity only made me fall for him all over again. On the other hand, his brothers were shameless. Why should I hold back with people like that?
This is prime real estate, close to everything you could need, and the mansion is massive. Honestly, it's almost too big.
George mused. Then, Fred said with a smirk.
What about moving George's family in here starting today? If you don't like it, we'll cut ties with you too. Now, what would you do?
I took a deep breath.
Sure, why not?
I said, and both brothers blinked and puzzled.
Really? Are you sure you're okay with that?
George asked. The very people who had suggested it were caught off guard.
Absolutely. Not just for George's family, but feel free to make yourself at home too, Fred. Here are the keys,
I said, handing over the keyring. They immediately grinned triumphantly.
Wow, Claire, you're so understanding. That's a relief.
You're pretty cool after all, Cease.
They said so, practically dancing with joy as they started planning their move.
Claire, are you sure?
Steve was the only one who looked uneasy and gave me a worried glance. I gave him a genuine smile.
Don't worry. It'll be fine.
A few days later, Steve and I were relaxing at home when the doorbell rang frantically. I opened it to find his brothers standing there, pale-faced and panicked.
What the hell is going on?
Tell them to stop, right now.
They were in a complete frenzy and practically begging.
The house is in chaos. When we came back, There were huge equipment tearing it down. They won't listen when we tell them to stop. You've got to do something.
Both brothers were yelling in unison. I calmly delivered my reply with a smile.
Well, of course they won't.
They turned to me at once. Their eyes were widened with panic.
What do you mean?
Well, a high-rise condo is going to be built on that land. They can't start construction without demolishing the house first, right?
I said calmly.
What, are you kidding?
They both gaped at me, their mouths hanging open.
That's also why the thriving restaurant had to be closed, or rather, to be relocated. We kept the utilities running until yesterday for the milestone celebration, though. So, it must have been a bit inconvenient for you today, right?
Oh.
They both turned pale and clearly realized something.
You're joking, Cease. This has to be a joke.
George said. Yet, with heavy equipment already on site, there was no room for jokes.
Why would I lie about something like this? If I were you, I'd focus on salvaging whatever you can. It's probably not too late to get some of your belongings out.
I said as I was getting tired of their whining.
What did you say?
I specifically told the demolition company to clear out everything left behind. If the equipment's already running, it'll be cleared out pretty quickly. Personally, I'd stop complaining and grab anything important while I still could.
The brothers exchanged a panicked look before shouting in unison.
This is bad.
Hurry.
They bolted out the door, and I turned to Steve with a satisfied expression.
You really didn't tell them, did you?
I asked Steve. He let out a long, weary sigh and gave me a wry smile.
My parents and I have been dealing with their nonsense for years. It's about time they learned their lesson. Though, I do feel bad for the demolition workers.
In fact, I had informed not only Steve, but also my in-laws that I had given the keys to the brothers and that they seemed to be planning to move in. Of course, I also told them that the house had already been sold and the handover date had been set. Thus, I left the decision to them whether or not to tell the brothers the truth. In the end, everyone chose to stay silent.
Don't worry. I made sure the new owner and the workers knew the situation.
I reassured him. I had anticipated this exact scenario.
Let's hope your brothers actually learn something.
I said so, and we drifted off to sleep. The next day arrived.
Honestly, I didn't think they'd go this far,
said my mother-in-law. We all gathered in the living room of my in-law's house. My mother-in-law let out a heavy sigh while the brothers sat on the floor, heads hanging in shame.
When the demolition workers wouldn't let you in, you decided to sneak in during the night to retrieve your belongings. It's unbelievable.
Well,
Yes, the brothers had climbed over the barricades in the middle of the night with flashlights in hand to grab whatever they could. Unfortunately for them, a neighbor saw the suspicious lights and called the police, and they ended up being hauled off before retrieving anything of value.
So not only did you fail to get anything important, but you also got yourselves arrested.
Each sigh from my in-laws made the brothers squirm more as they mumbled excuses no one wanted to hear. In fact, every past misdeed of theirs was being dragged out and left them with no defense.
Both of you owe Claire a proper apology.
Steve said so firmly when it became clear they had no intention of apologizing.
this is all her fault.
Fred turned to me and finally snapped. His face twisted in anger.
She set us up with her fake smiles and friendly act.
Of course. I knew something was off when you handed over the keys so easily. You're nothing but a schemer. How could you sell off the house without telling us? That's outrageous.
Faced with the brothers' baseless accusations and misplaced anger, I could only let out a tired smile.
I think you're misunderstanding something. That land and house were my inheritance, and so my property. Steve even went so far as to create a prenuptial agreement to ensure it was protected. Not that it matters, because you never had any rights to it in the first place.
What are you talking about?
Prenup agreement?
It seemed the term prenuptial agreement sounded like some kind of foreign spell to them, but I had no intention of explaining it further.
Besides, while it's true I agreed to sell the house and land, the decision was based on my grandparents' wishes. Even before I inherited it, they had received several offers to sell the property.
They kept declining, though. They wanted to maintain it during their lifetime. However, they told me it was difficult to maintain it and suggested I consider selling it once I inherited it.
So, I entrusted everything to a realtor my grandparents specifically trusted.
Naturally, there was no room for interference from the brothers regarding the sale.
But we're family.
Don't be so stingy.
The brothers still tried to argue, but their weak excuses only reminded me of the past. 3 years ago, I had started seriously thinking about marriage. I was raised by my father alone. My mother passed away shortly after I was born. My father and I were so close that our neighbors often commented on how inseparable we were. We went camping in the summer and snowboarding in the winter. We had countless memories together. Then suddenly, my father fell ill and passed away in the blink of an eye. I was devastated, not only by the loss of his warmth in our home, but also by my regret over not being able to do more for him. Steve was the one who comforted and supported me through it all. He not only helped with the funeral and memorial services, but also stayed by my side in a room full of memories of my father. When I was so overwhelmed by the grief that I couldn't move all day, he made me warm soup and spent entire nights listening to me reminisce. He stayed up all night listening to my stories about my dad, patiently standing by me as I processed my grief.
If I'm going to marry someone and spend the rest of my life with him, it has to be Steve. There's no one else. If there's anything about me you don't like, I'll change, so just tell me.
That's what I shouted during my 5th proposal attempt. After convincing Steve, who was hesitant because of his difficult family members, I finally got married to him. I've never regretted that choice. When I lost my father, I was determined to fulfill my grandparents' wishes, so I stayed true to that conviction. In contrast, these brothers-in-law are still nagging.
You really haven't learned your lesson, have you? Fine. I thought losing everything would be punishment enough, but now I'm going to demand compensation for the trouble you've caused me.
Exactly. We should charge you for the cab fare, the overpriced fish, the cafe bill, the utilities at the house you used freely, and the costs we incurred dealing with the police and other unnecessary hassle.
Steve pointed out one after another to defend me. The brothers let out pitiful groans and said,
Wait, that's too detailed.
You're robbing us.
They looked ready to cry, but their punishment wasn't over yet.
You're disowned.
My father-in-law declared.
Please wait.
Please, Dad, don't do it to us.
Eventually, they were kicked out of my in-laws' home, and news of their misdeeds spread to distant relatives. No one was left to turn to them. Their girlfriends and family abandoned them too. Now they live together in a tiny, run-down studio apartment.
This is truly wonderful. I can't believe we can live in such a place.
When the high-rise condo was finally completed on the site of the old house, Steve and I invited my in-laws to live on the same floor.
I'm glad to hear that. It was part of the deal. In exchange for the land, we were given one entire floor. I should be thanking you for agreeing to live here, close to us.
Some of the historic home's beams, pillars, and furnishings had been integrated into our new space. We took a photo together to celebrate our new home.
I'll hang this photo alongside the old ones.
The smiles of my loved ones shone brightly in the picture. I silently vowed to cherish them forever.